My name is Jason Wayne Lemieux, and I'm a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War. I served 4 years and 10 months in the United States Marine Corps Infantry and was honorably discharged with the rank of Sergeant. During my time in the Marine Corps, I served 3 deployments to Iraq, including the invasion. And in case any inquiring minds want to know, I served 4 years and 10 months because I voluntarily extended my enlistment contract by 10 months to redeploy with my unit for the 3rd tour. My first tour started in January 2003 and ended in September of that year. My second tour was from February to September of 2004, and my last tour was from September 2005 to March 30th, 2006. Proper rules of engagement serve an important strategic purpose, which is to legitimize military force. By projecting an image of restraint and professionalism, militaries seek to reinforce the idea that they're protecting local residents rather than oppressing them. Not only do these rules undermine support for any local opposition, they also deflect accusations of occupation and oppression from foreign countries and in some cases the people of the country the military is supposedly serving. Martin van Creveld, who was an Israeli military historian, even asserted some years ago that the British had not yet been driven from Northern Ireland because they were taking more casualties than the Irish were. The US, on the other hand, has not chosen to use rules of engagement in the same way in Iraq. The rules of engagement have been broadly defined and loosely enforced to protect US service members at the expense of the Iraqi people, and anyone who tells you different is either a liar or a fool. During the invasion of Iraq, during the push north to Baghdad, the rules of engagement given to me were gradually reduced to the point of non-existence, similar to the cases that you've already heard. When we first crossed the Kuwait-Iraq border at Az-Zubair in March 2003, we were operating under Geneva Convention guidelines and were authorized to shoot anyone wearing a military uniform, except for medical and religious personnel, unless they had surrendered. By the time we got to Baghdad, however, I was explicitly told by my chain of command that I could shoot anyone who came closer to me than I felt comfortable with if that person did not immediately move when I ordered them to do so, keeping in mind I don't speak Arabic. The general attitude that I got from my chain of command was better them than us, and the guidance that we were given reinforced that attitude across the ranks. It was an attitude that I watched intensify greatly throughout the course of my 3 tours. I remember in January of 2004 attending the formation where we were given what was going to be our mission for the 2nd deployment. And I was sitting there like a good Marine with my pen and paper, ready to write down those carefully chosen, thoughtful words that would justify my existence in Iraq for the next 7 months. And my commander told me that our mission was, and I quote, "to kill those who need to be killed and save those who need to be saved." And that was it. And with those words, he pretty much set the tone for the deployment. At the start of that 2nd deployment, our standing rules of engagement were that someone had to be displaying hostile intent and committing a hostile act before deadly force could be used. I won't get into the absurdity of asking one to discern what is going on in the mind of another individual, except to say that it was the individual Marine's job to determine what is hostile intent and a hostile action. However, during the April offensive of 2004, in which attacks erupted all over Anbar province, my unit was involved in a 2-day firefight. Shortly after the firefight was underway, the same commander who had given us the mission issued an order that everyone wearing a black dishdasha and a red headscarf was automatically displaying hostile intent and a hostile action and was to be shot. An hour or 2 later, he gave another order, this time that everyone on the streets was considered an enemy combatant. I can remember one instance after the order was given that afternoon when we came around a corner and an unarmed Iraqi man stepped out of a doorway. I remember the Marine directly in front of me raising his rifle and aiming at the unarmed man, and then I think just for some psychological reason my brain blocked out the actual shots, because the next thing I remember is stepping over the dead man's body to clear the room that he came out of. I remember that it was a storage room, and it was full of some Arabic brand of Iraq, or some Arabic brand of cheesy poofs, like Cheetos. There weren't any weapons in the area except for ours. The commander told us a couple of weeks later that over 100 enemy, quote unquote, had been killed. And to the best of my knowledge, that number includes all of the people who were shot for simply walking down the street in their own city. After the firefight was over, the standing rules of engagement for my unit were changed. so that Marines didn't need to identify a hostile action anymore in order to use deadly force. They just had to identify hostile intent. The rules also explicitly stated that carrying a shovel, standing on a rooftop while speaking on a cell phone or holding binoculars, or being out after curfew were automatically considered hostile intent, and we were authorized to use deadly force. And I can only guess how many innocent people died during my tour because of those orders. On my third tour, the rules of engagement were stricter, but they really only existed so that the command could say there were rules of engagement that were being followed. In reality, my officers explicitly told me and my fellow Marines that if we felt threatened by an Iraqi's presence, we should just shoot them, and the officers would quote-unquote take care of us. By this time, many of the Marines who were on their second or third tour had suffered such serious psychological trauma, having watched friends die and lose limbs, that because of these experiences, they were moved to shoot people who, in my opinion, were clearly non-combatants. There was one incident when a roadside bomb exploded, and a few minutes later, I watched a Marine start shooting at cars that were driving down the street hundreds of meters away and in the opposite direction from where the IED had exploded. We were too far away to identify who was in the cars, and they didn't pose any threat to us. And for all I could tell, as I was standing about 20 meters away from the Marine and about 300 meters from the cars, they were just passing motorists. It was long enough after and far enough away from the explosion that the people in the cars might not have even known that anything was going on or that anything had even happened, but the Marine was shooting at them anyway. This Marine had had his best friend get killed on our last deployment, and had also related to me a story about the 2-day firefight that I mentioned earlier, when he watched the commander, who had given us the order to shoot anyone on the street, shoot 2 old ladies that were walking and carrying vegetables. He said that the commander had told him to shoot the woman, and when he refused because they were carrying vegetables, the commander shot them. So when this Marine started shooting at people in cars that nobody else felt were threatening, he was only following the example that his commander had already set. I don't have anywhere near enough time to tell you every related experience that I had in Iraq. But in general, the rules of engagement changed frequently, contradicted themselves, and when they were restrictive, they were either loosely enforced or escalations of force, as shootings of civilians were known, were not reported because Marines did not want to send their brothers in arms to prison when all they were trying to do was protect themselves in a situation they'd been forced into, where there was a constant, ambiguous, and deadly threat, and any citizen of the country that they were supposedly liberating could have been wearing an explosive vest. With no way to identify their attackers and no clear mission worth dying for, Marines viewed the rules of engagement as either a joke or a technicality to be worked around so that they could bring each other home alive. Not only are the misuse of rules of engagement in Iraq indicative of supreme strategic incompetence, they are also a moral disgrace. The people who have set them should be ashamed of ourselves, and they're just one of the many reasons why the troops should be withdrawn immediately from Iraq. Thank you.